It was supposed to be a peaceful meeting, humanity's first formal contact with the galactic community. After decades of exploration, humanity had finally reached the stars, and the time had come to sit at the table with the galaxy's most powerful species. The Icaris, an ancient and peace-loving race, had invited humans to their home planet, where they governed with wisdom and a shared belief in unity. To the Icaris, this was simply another diplomatic exchange, a welcome opportunity to help yet another young species find its place in the cosmos. But humans weren't like the other species the Icaris had encountered. Humanity was far more stubborn, far less docile, and far more determined to shape its own fate. The moment the Icaris ambassador, Zethar, began outlining the rules for intergalactic interaction, the atmosphere shifted. At first, the humans nodded politely, exchanging glances with one another, waiting for Zethar's speech to conclude. But as the Icaris continued, detailing the expected conduct and regulations that govern trade, exploration, and territory, something inside humanity's representatives snapped. Captain Marcus Hale, the leader of the human delegation, felt his pulse quicken. The Icaris were polite, calm, and well-intentioned, but the undertone of their words was clear. Humanity was not to question the established order. They were to follow the rules made by the Icaris and their allies, rules that placed humans at the very bottom of the galactic hierarchy. The notion stung Marcus deeply. For centuries, humans had struggled on Earth, clawing their way from the brink of extinction to intergalactic explorers. They had fought through wars, plague, and devastation, never once backing down from their will to survive. And now, in front of the Icaris, they were being told how to live, how to grow, and how to interact, not out of malice, but out of an overwhelming desire to preserve order. "You're mistaken, Ambassador," Captain Hale said, cutting Zethar off mid-sentence. His voice, though calm, carried an undeniable edge. "We're not here to simply follow the rules. We're here to make our own path, and no one gets to decide that for us." Zethar blinked, his silver-blue eyes narrowing. He had been speaking to diplomats and rulers from all across the galaxy for centuries, but never had he encountered such defiance, especially from a species so newly arrived on the galactic stage. He smiled, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Captain, I understand your enthusiasm, but you must understand. The galaxy works on mutual respect, on a delicate balance between species. Your species doesn't need your rules," Marcus finished for him. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the assembly. The human delegation exchanged uneasy looks. They had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, the gravity of the situation hit hard. To challenge the Icaris wasn't just bold, it was unthinkable. "What do you propose, then?" Zethar asked, his tone more curious than threatening. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "We propose that humanity be allowed to grow in its own way without interference. We have no interest in being pacified or controlled. We've fought for everything we have. And if that means breaking the rules, then so be it." The Icaris ambassador's smile faltered for just a moment, and his hands clenched in his lap. In that fleeting moment of tension, a flicker of uncertainty passed through Zethar's mind. Humanity's resolve was not something he had prepared for. They had not simply come to negotiate, they had come to fight for their right to determine their own future. The implications of this were profound. Before Zethar could respond, a sharp ping sounded from the holoprojector at the center of the room. The Icaris, known for their advanced technology, had a method of instant communication that allowed them to monitor the entire galaxy in real time, and what flashed across the screen next was nothing short of a crisis. The Velraini, an aggressive and war-hungry race, had launched a surprise attack on one of humanity's outer colonies. The Icaris' peaceful face suddenly clouded with concern. but Marcus didn't flinch. In fact, he stood tall, a fire in his eyes that the Icarus had never seen before. "We don't need your rules to survive," he said softly, but with a conviction. That made Zethar pause. "We've learned how to fight for what we want, and if you think for 1 second that humanity will bow to anyone, let alone the Velrani, you're gravely mistaken." The room was silent for a long moment as the enormity of the situation settled in. The Icarus ambassador's expression softened, but only slightly. "It seems," Zethar finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of diplomatic experience, "that humans are unlike any species we've encountered before." "You're right," Marcus said, his voice fierce now. "You've never seen a species like us. You never will again." And with that, the meeting that was supposed to shape humanity's future had instead marked the beginning of a new and unpredictable chapter in galactic history. The Icarus may have been the first to notice humanity's fierce determination, but they wouldn't be the last. Across the stars, the galaxy was about to learn the true meaning of human willpower. The news of the Velrani attack spread like wildfire across the galaxy, but for humanity, it was not a moment of despair. It was a call to action. Captain Marcus Hale had prepared for this, anticipating a time when the galaxy would attempt to crush humanity underfoot. His initial defiance in the Icarus meeting wasn't just about standing up to them. It was a declaration that humanity would never be passive in the face of threat. And now, as the Velrani turned their sights on humanity's outer colonies, the human response was swift, decisive, and brutally efficient. The colony under assault was a small outpost on the edge of human expansion, barely a blip on the galactic map. The Velrani, a war-hungry species, assumed that this remote location would be easy pickings, a distraction to waste humanity's resources on. They were wrong. Instead of retreating, as many species would have, the humans dug in, using every bit of their ingenuity to turn the tide. With primitive but highly effective guerrilla tactics, they made use of the harsh environment around the colony. The Velrani, who prided themselves on their advanced military technology, were taken by surprise when they encountered homemade explosive devices, cleverly rigged defense systems, and sharp-edged traps hidden in the dense jungle terrain. These weren't just clever traps. This was the human spirit at work. The Velrani forces were large and heavily armed, but humanity had something they hadn't accounted for: resourcefulness. Humanity's military might wasn't in its numbers or technology. It was in their capacity to improvise under pressure, to adapt when everything seemed lost. As the battle raged on, Marcus Hale watched from the command center, his face grim but determined. "They think they can wipe us out with their fleets," he muttered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Cade. "They haven't learned a thing about us." Sarah nodded, scanning the battle reports. "We've turned the tide, Captain. The Velrani are retreating. We might actually win this one." Marcus's eyes hardened. "It's not about winning. It's about sending a message." Across the battlefield, human soldiers were engaged in close-quarters combat, their faces set with the same relentless determination that had carried their species through centuries of hardship. They fought not for glory, not for riches, but for their very existence. The Velrani underestimated that kind of willpower at their peril. But the fight wasn't over. The Velrani were relentless in their pursuit, regrouping and coming back for another assault, this time with reinforcements. Humanity's resources were running low, but there was something no amount of reinforcements could ever prepare for: the unpredictability of human resolve. Meanwhile, as the Velrani forces pressed their attack, a message from the Icaris came through. The peaceful race had never seen combat like this. They had watched, horrified, as the Velrani advanced on humanity's small colony, but now their tone was different. Zithar's calm voice came through the transmission. "Captain Hale, we have seen the ferocity with which your people defend their colonies, but we implore you, This violence will not solve the problem. If you agree to negotiate, we can help. You do not need to be enemies with the Velrani." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. The Akaris, for all their wisdom and pacifism, had no real understanding of what humanity had faced on Earth, or what they would do to survive. Negotiation? To them, it seemed like the logical solution, a peaceful resolution to the violence. But Marcus knew the truth. They couldn't negotiate with the human spirit. "We don't need their help," Marcus said, turning to Sarah. "We need them to understand something. They'll either respect us or they'll regret it." The Velrani didn't know it yet, but humanity was about to show them what happens when they face a force that won't break, bend, or back down. Marcus sent out orders to the remaining forces. It was time for humanity to strike back, not in defense, but with an offensive that would send the Velrani fleet into full retreat. When the next battle came, it was like nothing the Velrani had ever faced. The human fleet, small but highly trained and equipped with salvaged alien tech, took the fight to the Velrani head-on. Instead of waiting for the enemy to strike, humanity struck first, using the element of surprise, traps within asteroid fields, and guerrilla warfare tactics on the galactic scale. Velrani warships, overconfident in their superiority, found themselves overwhelmed by the chaos that humanity unleashed. Despite the odds, the human forces held their ground, and slowly, the Velrani began to falter. They had underestimated, not just humanity's resolve, but their ability to innovate in the heat of battle. By the time the Velrani finally retreated, their fleet was in tatters. They had suffered not just losses, but a crushing blow to their pride. Humanity's victory wasn't just about strategy. It was a statement. Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy, igniting a wave of shock and awe. The Akaris, who had once believed they could control the fate of humanity, now realized that humanity was something different. They weren't simply another species. They were a force to be reckoned with, and this was just the beginning. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Humanity, against all odds, had fought back and won. The Velrani were forced to retreat, humiliated by their failure, and a spark was ignited in the hearts of every species in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a footnote in galactic history. They had risen, and now they would be watched with respect, and perhaps even with fear. The galaxy was abuzz. News of humanity's unexpected victory spread faster than light, carried by the vast networks of interstellar communication that linked the galaxy's dominant species. Most of the galaxy's civilizations had dismissed humanity as a young, untested species, primitive by galactic standards, barely scraping by on their planet before they stumbled into the cosmos. But after the audacious defeat of the Velrani, that perception was beginning to change. Captain Marcus, Hale watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Defiant, as the latest reports flooded in. The Velrani had retreated, but their defeat had shaken the galaxy. In every corner of known space, ambassadors, generals, and diplomats were beginning to reassess humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. Those who had mocked them were suddenly taking a much closer look. "Captain," Sarah Cade's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The Akaris are requesting another meeting. They're offering assistance in rebuilding the Velrani colonies we liberated. It seems they've realized we aren't the same as the other species they've dealt with." Marcus's lips curled into a thin smile. The Akaris were known for their deep wisdom and their pacifist nature, but their kind had never understood the true nature of human perseverance. Humanity didn't need assistance. They didn't need permission to act. They needed to be free to make their own path. "I'm not interested in their help," Marcus said, his tone resolute. "Tell them that. Let them know that humanity doesn't need anyone to fix our problems. We'll rebuild on our own terms." The message was sent, and the Akaris, though disappointed, could do little but respect it. What they hadn't counted on was that humanity wasn't simply resourceful. It was unpredictable. They had the ability to turn the tide when all seemed lost, and that made them terrifying in the eyes of the other species. Despite this, not everyone was in awe of humanity's victory. The Velrani were humiliated, and they were not the kind of species to accept defeat quietly. The news of their retreat did not sit well with their warlords. The galaxy's most brutal and war-driven empire had been bested by a younger, more unrefined species. It was an affront to everything they believed in. Veldar, the supreme commander of the Velrani war fleet, was furious. His commanders had insisted that the Velrani forces were unbeatable, that no upstart race could ever hope to challenge their military superiority. But the human strategies, so simple and so bold, had outmaneuvered them at every turn. The Velrani had underestimated humanity's adaptability and resolve, and now they were facing the consequences. Veldar seethed in his war room, his hands gripping the control panel until his knuckles turned white. The humans! They dared to challenge us, he muttered under his breath. They will pay for their insolence. But Veldar was no fool. He knew better than to make rash decisions. Humanity's tactics had been unpredictable, but one thing was clear. They would not back down. They had proven that their willpower could turn even the worst odds in their favor. He would need more than brute force to defeat them. The Velrani would have to regroup, to adapt. But first, they needed to crush the humans' morale, to remind them that the galaxy had rules, and that was where the Icaris came in. While humanity stood firm in their independence, the Icaris were attempting to make their own peace with the Velrani. They sought to mediate a truce, to end the hostilities between the two species. They were playing a delicate game, one that depended on balance. The Icaris had no interest in war, but they knew that a Velrani counterstrike against humanity would tip the scales into something much darker. As the Velrani prepared to rebuild their forces, the Icaris sent a different kind of message. This time, it wasn't an offer of assistance. It was a warning, one that didn't come in the form of threats, but rather a cryptic message embedded in their latest transmission. The galaxy is a fragile place, Captain Hale. The message. From Zethar, the Icaris ambassador, read, "You have proven your strength, but beware. The Velrani will not be the only ones watching. There are others in the galaxy who have lived by their own rules for centuries. They are not as patient as we are, nor as understanding. You have challenged the status quo, and it will not go unnoticed." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. The Icaris weren't threatening them. No, they were warning them. The galaxy was full of powerful, unpredictable forces that humanity hadn't even begun to understand. The Velrani were one thing, but what of the others? The Zorath, who thrived on chaos. The Valtari, who viewed all other species as expendable. And the mysterious Cathari, who had been known to obliterate entire civilizations for the slightest perceived slight? Marcus knew what had to be done. Humanity had won the battle, but the war was far from over. They had made a powerful statement. Yes, but they had also made powerful enemies. He turned to Sarah, his expression hardening. "We need to prepare for what comes next. The galaxy will never see us as weak again, but that doesn't mean they won't try to destroy us. We've just made our first real enemies. Now we have to make sure the next encounter doesn't go the same way." "Agreed," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We need to be ready for whatever they throw at us. And when they come, Captain, we will remind them that humanity will never be broken." The galaxy had taken notice, and humanity was ready to prove that, when it came to survival, there was nothing more dangerous than a species that refused to quit. The stakes were higher now, and every force in the galaxy would feel the weight of humanity's relentless will. Weeks had passed since the victory against the Velrani, but the tension in the galaxy only intensified. Humanity's unexpected strength had sent ripples across every corner of known space. While many now recognize the indomitable spirit of humanity, a few of the galaxy's most powerful species saw it as a threat they could not allow to fester. They had underestimated the humans before, and they would not make that mistake again. But more ominously, some saw opportunity in humanity's rise, and in the shadows, a dark force began to stir. Marcus Hale stood at the command center of the best, defiant, looking out into the blackness of space, his face lit only by the flickering console displays. The fleet had won the battle, but the true challenge had just begun. Intelligence reports suggested that the Velrani were licking their wounds, but their pride had not been shattered. They would rebuild, faster and more fiercely than before. Worse still, there were whispers of other, more sinister factions in the galaxy preparing to act. The Icaris' warning had been clear. The galaxy was full of those who had lived by their own rules for millennia, and some of those rules were brutal. "Captain, we're getting strange signals from the Cathari sector." Sarah Cade's voice interrupted Marcus's thoughts. "It's nothing we can identify. It's like a warning, almost as if someone's drawing a line in the sand." Marcus's brow furrowed. The Cathari were one of the most enigmatic and fearsome species in the galaxy. No one truly understood them. They were shadows, existing in the background of galactic politics, moving when they saw fit. No one had dared to provoke them, until now. Humanity's victory over the Velrani had made waves. Whether or not the Cathari were preparing to act, Marcus couldn't be certain, but their silence spoke volumes. And silence, especially from an ancient race like the Cathari, was never a good sign. "I don't like this, Captain," Sarah continued, her voice tinged with concern. "The Cathari don't react to much, but they've never been this agitated before." "Agitated, huh?" Marcus mused. "Keep an eye on their movements. If they make a move, we'll be ready." Despite the constant pressure, Marcus felt a strange confidence in his bones. Humanity had always been a species of underdogs. The galaxy had laughed at them when they first arrived. Now, they were forced to reckon with a force they couldn't predict. It was that very unpredictability that made humanity so dangerous. The Velrani learned that the hard way. The Cathari would learn it soon enough as well. Yet, there were more immediate threats. The Velrani had begun rebuilding their fleet and had declared their intention to retake the colonies humanity had liberated. Their ships were more advanced now, incorporating some of the very alien technology humanity had scavenged from the battlefield. They had learned from their mistakes, but so had humanity. Marcus knew that to stand their ground, humanity would have to evolve faster than their enemies. It wouldn't just be about brute force anymore. It would be about using their ingenuity and their unrelenting drive to stay one step ahead. The tactical advantage humanity had was their resilience, something that the alien factions would soon understand all too well. As if on cue, an encrypted message arrived. The transmission was from a human scout ship on the edge of the Velrani-controlled territories. "Captain?" The voice on the other end was tense. "The Velrani fleet is massing. They're heading toward the human colonies in the Geralt system. They're preparing for an all-out assault. They've sent some sort of prototype ships, weapons we've never seen before. We're not sure what they've done, but they're coming. Fast." Marcus clenched his jaw. He'd known this was coming. The Velrani wouldn't simply lick their wounds. They'd come back with more fury, more firepower. But this was something new. A new ship design, something they hadn't faced before. Prototype weapons, the kind that the Velrani weren't ready to use in the last engagement. Humanity was dealing with an unknown quantity now. "We can't let them get to Geralt," Marcus said, his voice hard with determination. "Prepare our fleet. Get us to Geralt and get us there yesterday. We're not waiting for them to make the first move." As the Defiant and the rest of the fleet sprang to action, Sarah turned to Marcus. "Captain, we've seen the Velrani's tactics, but if they've really got new ships, this could be more than just a simple clash. This might be their way of taking humanity down before we grow too powerful." Marcus glanced at the screens in front of him, which showed humanity's ships readying for the upcoming battle. I'll tell you one thing, Sarah. They've made a mistake. What do you mean? Marcus's eyes gleamed with a hint of resolve. They thought they could break us once. They thought it was a fluke. But we're not the kind of species you crush by sending a bigger hammer. We don't stop. We don't back down. Then it's not just the Velrani we're fighting anymore, is it? Sarah said, a knowing look in her eyes. No, Marcus answered, his voice cold as ice. It's everyone who thinks they can push us around. It's the galaxy that's been watching, waiting to see if humanity has what it takes. And they've got their answer. We'll face the Velrani again, but we're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for our place among the stars. The Cathari, the Velrani, and whatever new players emerged from the darkness, they would soon realize the truth. Humanity was a force like no other, and when they fought with unmatched tenacity. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once. It wouldn't make that mistake again. The Geralt system lay at the very edge of humanity's colonized space, a vital hub for the new human frontier. It had been one of the first systems humanity had successfully defended during the Velrani assault, and its significance had only grown since. Now, with the Velrani fleet rapidly closing in, it was clear that the coming battle would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. Would the relentless will of the humans hold, or would they be overwhelmed by the sheer scale of their enemy's force? As the Defiant entered the Geralt system, Marcus Hale stood on the command deck, his eyes locked on the star chart displayed on the view screen. The Velrani fleet was massive, a terrifying array of warships and prototypes emerging from the darkness of space. The battle ahead would be unlike anything humanity had faced so far. Captain, we're receiving a message from Velrani Command. Sarah Cade's voice broke through Marcus's thoughts. They're offering terms of surrender, or rather, a chance for humanity to submit to their authority before things escalate. Further, Marcus scoffed at the message. The Velrani had been humiliated once. They didn't expect to be so easily dismissed again. But the words of their emissary didn't interest him. What mattered now was the fight that was coming. There would be no submission. Humanity wasn't interested in bending the knee to anyone, let alone those who had previously tried to erase them. We'll deal with their offer later, Marcus said, his voice calm but tinged with resolve. Prepare the fleet. We don't have time for their games. The Velrani think they've learned from their mistakes, but they haven't accounted for one thing: the human spirit. The fleet moved into position around the Geralt system's primary moon. Marcus's strategy was simple: prevent the Velrani from reaching the colonies, force them to fight in a choke point, and use their own arrogance to their disadvantage. The Velrani were confident in their new prototype ships, too confident perhaps. They had failed to understand that humanity's strength didn't lie in numbers or superior technology, but in their adaptability, their resilience, and their unpredictable nature. As Marcus scanned the fleet's readiness reports, his mind raced through every contingency. The prototype ships the Velrani had deployed were an unknown quantity, but Marcus knew one thing: they would underestimate humanity's response. The Velrani had built a fleet to overwhelm, but humanity was not built to be overwhelmed. They had outsmarted their enemies before, and they would do it again. Captain, the Velrani are initiating a full-scale assault, Sarah reported, her voice sharp. They're using their prototype ships to lead the charge. Looks like they're testing their new weapons. Marcus turned toward the tactical display, watching as the Velrani ships began their advance. The new prototype vessels were sleek, dark, and ominous, their weapons firing before the ships even fully emerged from the shadows. A series of energy blasts flashed across the black expanse, and humanity's fleet immediately responded, activating their own defense shields and preparing their weapons. "Shields up!" Marcus barked. "Engage at long range! We don't get close until we know what we're dealing with." The first volley of Velrani fire struck humanity's ships, shaking the Defiant as the energy pulses raked across its shields, but the human vessels were ready. Humanity had spent weeks refitting their ships with improved technology, scavenged from the wreckage of past battles, and enhanced by the ingenuity of human engineers. The ship's armor held firm, and the counterfire from human weapons lit up. "The stars! We're holding steady, but they're overwhelming our outer defenses," Sarah said. "Their new weapons are more powerful than we anticipated." "We can't allow them to break through," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Initiate Plan Beta. Deploy the decoy drones." The decoy drones had been humanity's secret weapon. Small, nimble vessels designed to mimic the energy signatures of human warships. They were perfect for drawing enemy fire and distracting the Velrani long enough to turn the tide. As the drones were launched, they scattered into the void, creating false targets for the Velrani fleet. The massive enemy ships fired relentlessly at the drones, their weapons spreading across the stars like fireworks. But it was a calculated distraction. "Now," Marcus ordered, "reposition the fleet and move in on their flanks." Human ships, previously hidden behind the decoy field, pivoted quickly, breaking free from their defensive positions and charging toward the Velrani's exposed sides. The unexpected maneuver caught the Velrani off guard. They had expected a direct assault, but instead, they were met with a flanking strike from humanity's smaller, faster ships. The Velrani fleet scrambled to adjust, but it was already too late. The first salvo from humanity's ships tore through the Velrani prototypes, and the second wave of counterattacks crippled their war engines. The Velrani, despite their superior firepower, had failed to anticipate the depth of humanity's resourcefulness. Marcus watched as the Velrani fleet began to fracture. The first of their prototype ships exploded in a bright flash, and the shockwave rippled through their formation, causing chaos within their ranks. Another Velrani ship, its weapons overloaded, erupted in a fiery cloud. "We've got them on." "The run," Sarah said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice, but Marcus didn't share the same confidence. The Velrani were down, but they weren't out. This was only the beginning. He knew that the Velrani would regroup, that they would come back stronger, angrier, and humanity would need to be ready for that. "We haven't won yet," Marcus said, grimly. "We've broken their momentum, but they'll fight back. Keep your eyes open. The war has just begun." In the wake of the battle, humanity stood victorious, for now. But in the back of Marcus's mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous was lurking on the horizon. The Velrani would return. But more ominously, so would the forces that had watched from the shadows, waiting for their own chance to strike. The galaxy had been warned. Humanity wasn't going anywhere, but the cost of their survival was only beginning to reveal itself. The Velrani retreat had been swift, but far from final. After the fierce battle in the Geralt system, their fleet had been significantly diminished, yet Marcus Hale knew better than to assume the victory was permanent. The Velrani were calculating, and they would rebuild, just as the humans had done after every challenge. But this time, things felt different. Something was stirring beneath the surface of the galaxy, and it wasn't just the Velrani. The quiet after the battle felt eerie. Humanity had dealt a crippling blow to their enemy, but the galaxy was a large place. It didn't take long for Marcus to understand that the victory wasn't the end. It was just a chapter, one that had revealed an even greater truth. Humanity was no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for something far larger. They were being tested by forces they could barely comprehend. "The Cathari have finally moved." Sarah Cade's voice cut through the tension on the bridge of the Defiant. The word Cathari made the air feel colder, heavier. The Cathari were a shadowy, ancient species, and their intentions were as unclear as their motivations. What they did know was that the Cathari never acted without purpose, and their purpose was rarely benign. "Where?" Marcus asked, his tone sharp with concern. "They're massing at the rim," Sarah replied. The rim was a far-flung region of space, sparsely populated and often used as a hiding place for the most dangerous or covert of operations. If the Cathari had chosen the rim as their focal point, it meant they were preparing something big. They were no longer content to be just distant observers. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. The Velrani had been the immediate threat, but the Cathari were something far more elusive. Their true strength lay not in their weapons, but in their ability to manipulate and control events from behind the scenes. For millennia, they had quietly shaped the galaxy, using subtlety rather than overt force. Humanity's unexpected rise, its raw willpower and resilience, threatened to unearth the delicate balance they had maintained. "We need to find out what they're planning," Marcus said, turning toward the rest of his command staff. "And we need to do it quietly. No loud declarations. If we tip them off, it could be worse than the Velrani." "We'll launch a reconnaissance team," Sarah suggested. "A small fleet, covert, fast, and equipped with the best tech we've got. We'll infiltrate their space, gather intel, and report back before they even know we're there." Marcus nodded. He trusted Sarah's judgment implicitly. If anyone could infiltrate the Cathari's shadows, it was her. "Do it, and make sure. They have the latest in stealth tech. We don't want them to even sense we're there until we're already gone." As the fleet moved toward the Cathari-controlled rim, tension in the command room grew. The silence between the crew members was palpable. Everyone knew the stakes. The Velrani were a known enemy, brutal and direct. But the Cathari? They played a different game entirely. The stakes were high, and the outcome uncertain. Meanwhile, the human colonies in the Geralt system began to rebuild. Despite the chaos of war, human ingenuity proved to be a stabilizing force. Engineers were working around the clock to repair the damaged infrastructure, while the fighters who had stood on the front lines were busy rallying the civilians. Humanity was a resilient species, one that could rebuild not just its ships but its cities, its colonies, and its entire way of life, no matter the cost. Back aboard the Defiant, Marcus sat in his captain's chair, eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. A quiet buzz filled the room as Sarah prepared her team for their mission. The upcoming mission to the Cathari Rim would be delicate and possibly deadly. Even as humanity's spirit had proven unbreakable, there were those who still believed that the galaxy had no place for them, and if the Cathari were among those who didn't see humanity's value, they would stop at nothing to eradicate this growing threat. "Captain," Sarah's voice broke his train of thought. "Recon team is ready. We've confirmed the stealth tech is operational. I'm taking a small squad with me. We'll be in and out within the next 48 hours. Marcus looked up, his eyes locking with hers. "Stay safe, Sarah. The Cathari are dangerous for reasons we can't fully predict. If anything goes wrong, abort the mission immediately." "I'll keep that in mind," Sarah replied with a tight smile, but the grim determination in her eyes told Marcus everything he needed to know. Sarah Cade didn't take failure lightly. As the stealth fleet moved into position, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was more than just about uncovering information. He knew the Cathari had been watching humanity for far longer than they realized, perhaps even before the Velrani had made their first moves. Humanity had been thrust into the spotlight far too suddenly, and their unrelenting will had made them a target. The Cathari were no ordinary adversaries. They didn't just fight for control, they fought to shape the future of the galaxy according to their own vision. And if humanity was to survive the storm that was about to break, they would have to show the galaxy once again that they were not to be underestimated. Hours passed before the first transmission came in. It was brief, garbled, and then cut off abruptly. But it was enough. The message was clear. "They've found us." The voice was Sarah's, and it sounded like she was barely holding it together. Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he stood from his chair. The stakes had just become far more personal. The Cathari had made their move, and now humanity had no choice but to respond. The silence in the command room was suffocating as Marcus took one last look at the battlefield ahead. Whatever the Cathari were planning, humanity's Relentless Will would meet it head-on. The galaxy had just underestimated them in an entirely new way. And this time, humanity would not back down. The voice on the comms was barely recognizable through the static, but there was no mistaking the fear that laced Sarah Cade's words. "They've found us." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Marcus Hale with a sinking feeling in his gut. It had only been hours since Sarah and her team had deployed on their covert mission to the Cathari-controlled rim, and already things had gone sideways. If the Cathari had found them, they were already deep within enemy territory, and the hunt was now on. "Status," Marcus barked, eyes narrowing as he turned toward Sarah's second-in-command, Lieutenant Evan Hayes, who was monitoring the situation from his post. "We've detected a massive energy spike," Hayes reported, his voice tense. "It's coming from the Cathari stronghold. Looks like they've activated their fleet's long-range detection systems. They're aware of the stealth tech we've deployed." "Damn it," Marcus muttered under his breath. He had anticipated some resistance, but he hadn't expected the Cathari to react so quickly. They were no strangers to espionage, but they had always favored manipulation over brute force. For them to deploy a direct pursuit meant they'd recognized the human threat for what it was, something far too unpredictable and relentless to be ignored. "Prepare the fleet for combat," Marcus ordered. "I want every ship at battle stations. We may need to extract Sarah and her team sooner than we thought." "Captain?" Sarah's voice came through again, faint and distorted. "It's worse than we feared. They're activating their warp drives. I think they're trying to isolate us, cut us off from the rest of the fleet. We're not going to make it back without help. You have to—" The transmission cut off once more, leaving an unbearable silence hanging over the bridge. Marcus clenched his fists. He knew the Cathari well enough to understand their tactics. They weren't going to just chase Sarah and her team down. They'd use everything in their arsenal to trap them, to break them apart piece by piece. The Cathari were methodical, and they didn't leave room for mistakes. He slammed his fist. On the arm of his chair, a sharp, painful crack reverberating through his hand. "We're not losing anyone," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Prepare a rescue team. Deploy the stealth pods. We're going after them." The crew scrambled to execute his orders. Marcus could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline flowing through his veins. The human spirit wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting even when the odds were against them. And when the lives of his crew were at stake, that meant doing the impossible. As the Defiant accelerated toward the Cathari stronghold, Marcus stared at the star-filled void on the view screen. The Cathari were skilled at manipulating information, making them a formidable opponent in the shadows. But humanity had an edge they hadn't yet considered: unpredictability. The very thing that had thrown the Velrani off balance was the same thing that would make humanity impossible to control. "Captain, the Cathari are deploying their fleet," Sarah's voice cut through once more, sharper this time, though still, tinged with urgency. "It's a full mobilization. I'm transmitting our location now. Get here fast." "Hold tight, Sarah," Marcus responded. "We're coming for you." He didn't waste any time. The Defiant was already entering the outer edges of the Cathari-controlled space, the distant glow of their stronghold visible on the edge of the system. Marcus had faced enemies who outnumbered him, outgunned him, but there was one thing that always tipped the balance in humanity's favor. When humans fought, they fought dirty. They didn't rely solely on brute strength or firepower. They relied on their ability to think on their feet, to adapt in ways their enemies could never anticipate. "Ready the stealth pods," Marcus said again, his voice steely and unwavering. "We'll infiltrate their perimeter. We're not giving them time to build a defense." As his fleet neared the Cathari stronghold, Marcus's mind raced. He knew that Sarah and her team had already been compromised. If the Cathari had found them, that meant they'd been able to trace the stealth tech, and now every corner of the system was likely crawling with Cathari ships. The rescue mission wasn't going to be a quiet affair. They would have to take the fight to the Cathari in the heart of their own stronghold. "Deploying pods now," Hayes reported, his voice taut with focus. "We'll be on the ground in 10 minutes. Captain, we're still getting jamming signals. The Cathari are trying to lock us out." "I don't care about their jamming signals," Marcus replied, a grim smile creeping across his face. "We've faced worse. We're not turning back now. We'll outsmart them, like we always do." The stealth pods were designed to be compact and nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Their small, sleek design made them difficult to track, and their advanced cloaking technology kept them hidden from prying eyes. But they were not invincible. If the Cathari were capable of detecting Sarah's team, they would surely notice these pods if they weren't deployed carefully. Minutes passed. The silence on the bridge only broken by the soft hum of the ship's systems. Marcus stood, hands clasped behind his back, as he gazed at the ever-encroaching Cathari stronghold. This was it, the point of no return. He turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Cade's right-hand man, Evan Hayes, and nodded. "Once the pods are on the surface, we move in," Marcus ordered. "We don't leave anyone behind." It was humanity's moment to prove the galaxy wrong once again. The Cathari may have thought they could outwit and outmaneuver them, but they had underestimated one thing: the indomitable will of humans to survive, to protect their own. As the pods descended into the hostile atmosphere, Marcus felt a sudden rush of clarity. The human spirit was a force the galaxy had never reckoned with before. And this time, humanity was bringing its wrath, its ingenuity, and its unbreakable will straight to the Cathari doorstep. There would be no retreat this time. They were coming for Sarah, and they weren't leaving without her. The Cathari stronghold loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette sharp against the vastness of the blackened sky. Marcus Hale stood at the helm of the Defiant, his eyes fixed on the view screen, heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and resolve. The Cathari thought they had humanity cornered, thought their centuries of manipulation and subtlety would keep them in control, but they had failed to understand one fundamental truth. When humans fought, they fought with an intensity that could not be predicted nor contained. The stealth pods carrying Marcus's rescue team descended through the dense atmosphere of the Cathari world, silent and deadly. Their mission was simple: find Sarah and her team, extract them, and leave no trace behind. The Cathari might have the advantage of numbers and technology, but humanity had something far more dangerous: relentless determination. "Pods are on the ground," Evan Hayes reported from the communications station. "We've managed to avoid detection so far, but there's a heavy presence of Cathari patrols on the surface. We can't be sure how much longer we'll stay undetected." "We don't need long," Marcus replied, his voice cold and focused. "Once we've got them, we're pulling out. No hesitation." The clock was ticking. The Cathari, with their centuries of calculating, long-game strategies, were closing in. They were preparing for something big, something that would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. But Marcus could feel it in his bones. The galaxy wasn't ready for what was about to happen. On the ground, Sarah Cade's team moved swiftly and silently through the alien terrain. The Cathari stronghold was unlike anything humanity had encountered, an eerie mix of ancient architecture and sophisticated technology. The landscape was barren, rocky, and stark, but the enemy was everywhere. Silent Cathari patrols moved like shadows, their sensory networks alert to any movement. But the humans were prepared. They had been trained to adapt, to think quickly, to fight with ingenuity and precision. Sarah's heart raced as she crouched behind a rock formation, her rifle trained on the patrol ahead. The Cathari were close, too close. Every breath she took was measured, controlled. She'd led countless covert missions, but this was different. The Cathari were not like the Velrani. They didn't fight with brute force. They fought with subtlety, manipulating the battlefield until their enemies were overwhelmed. She looked over at her team, eyes narrowing as she signaled them to hold their position. Her comm unit crackled to life. "Sarah," Marcus's voice came. "Through. calm but urgent. "We're on our way. We'll have you out in 20 minutes. Do you have eyes on the target?" Sarah hesitated. She had to make a choice. Did she risk engaging the Cathari now or wait for backup? The intel they had gathered earlier had suggested the Cathari were ready to launch a galactic offensive, and that couldn't happen. If they didn't stop it now, the entire galaxy would pay the price. "I've got eyes on the target," Sarah responded, a grim determination in her voice. "The Cathari are already mobilizing their forces. We can't wait. We'll make our move and fight our way out. You just make sure we have a way out when it's time." "Understood," Marcus replied. "We're ready. When you are, just stay alive. We're not leaving anyone behind." Sarah nodded, even though she knew Marcus couldn't see it. She turned to her team, signaling them to move out. They would need to fight their way through the Cathari stronghold and out again, but they were human. They had faced insurmountable odds before, and they had always found a way to win. The mission was about to get even more dangerous. The Cathari were no longer playing by the rules. They had escalated, activating their most advanced weapon systems and preparing for full engagement. But Sarah and her team were about to show them just how deadly a cornered human could be. "Get ready," Sarah whispered to her team. "We fight dirty. We don't give them an inch. We don't give them a chance to think." The Cathari patrols moved in closer. Sarah's squad opened fire in a synchronized assault, striking fast and hard. The Cathari, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, faltered. Their precision weapons fired back in return, but it was too late. The humans had already moved, slipping through the shadows, overwhelming the alien forces with calculated strikes and sudden bursts of aggression. The Cathari had never encountered combat like this before. They relied on their advanced tech, their deceptive tactics, but humans were unpredictable. They adapted, they learned, they overcame. As Sarah's team pressed deeper into the stronghold, the countdown clock on Marcus's display was ticking down. The Cathari were regrouping, their forces mobilizing for a counterattack. But Sarah knew they didn't have much time. The longer they stayed in the heart of the Cathari stronghold, the greater the risk of a full-scale retaliation. 20 seconds, Marcus's voice echoed through the comm channel. "We've got you covered. Evac on standby." "Understood," Sarah replied. "Everyone get to the extraction point now. We're done here. Time to go." In a final, desperate push, the humans fought, their way through the maze of alien structures and toward the designated landing zone. Explosions lit up the sky as Cathari ships fired on their position, but the humans were already on the move, securing their route to safety. The Cathari were caught in the chaos, unable to adapt to the sheer unpredictability of human tactics, as the extraction pods descended. Sarah's heart beat faster. They'd done it. They had faced down one of the most cunning and dangerous forces in the galaxy, and they were leaving with their lives. And the information they had risked everything. For Marcus was right. Humans were not just survivors. They were fighters, innovators, and when necessary, they were the wild card that the galaxy could never predict. As the pods ascended into the atmosphere, leaving the shattered Cathari stronghold behind, Marcus allowed himself a moment of reflection. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had just made the galaxy take notice. Again. And this time, there would be no underestimating them. The human will was unstoppable.